She was invisible until the night a diamond went missing, and suddenly, everyone was looking at her. Let me tell you about Nina Brooks. She lived in a world where counting mattered. Not counting blessings, though she tried to do that too, but counting everything else. Counting the coins left in her purse after paying rent. Counting the hours until her next shift. Counting the pills in her aunt's medicine bottle, wondering if they'd last until her next paycheck. Nina was 24 years old, and she was so tired. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better days, probably back in the 1970s. The elevator didn't work. The paint in the hallway was peeling like old skin. But inside her small studio, Nina kept everything clean. She couldn't afford much, but she could afford dignity. The floors were swept. The dishes were washed. The single window had a curtain she'd sewn herself from fabric she found at a thrift store. And in the corner, in the only bed, slept her Aunt Marie. Marie had raised Nina when her parents died in a car accident. Nina was 7 years old then, scared and alone, and Marie, her mother's older sister, had opened her arms without hesitation. Marie worked 2 jobs to put food on the table. She sat with Nina through nightmares. She taught her that being poor didn't mean being worthless. Now Marie was 71, and her heart was failing. The medical bills came like waves, one after another, drowning them both. Insurance covered some of it, but never enough. Never enough. So Nina worked. She worked at Rosie's Cafe during the day, serving coffee and sandwiches to people who sometimes left tips and sometimes didn't. She worked catering events at night when she could get them. Weddings, corporate parties, anything that paid. She smiled until her face hurt. She carried heavy trays until her arms shook. She came home and soaked her swollen feet in cold water while counting, always counting, to see if they'd make it through another month. They always barely made it. This particular evening, Nina was wiping down tables after the dinner rush. Her lower back ached. Her shoes had a hole in the left sole that she'd covered with duct tape. She was thinking about the electric bill, overdue by 2 weeks, when her manager, Dennis, approached her. Dennis was a kind man, round-bellied and soft-spoken. He looked nervous. "Nina," he said quietly, "can I talk to you for a second?" Her heart dropped. Those words usually meant bad news. Was she being let go? Had she done something wrong? "Of course," she said, setting down her rag. Dennis glanced around the nearly empty cafe, then leaned in. "I got a call today. From an event coordinator. Very high-end clientele." Nina waited, confused. "They're doing a private birthday gala. Ultra-exclusive. And they specifically requested staff from local businesses, people who come recommended." He paused. "I recommended you." "Me?" Nina's voice came out small. "You're my best worker, Nina. You're professional, you're careful, and you're kind to people. They need servers for one night. This Saturday." He pulled out a folded paper from his apron and handed it to her. "This is what they're paying." Nina unfolded the paper. Her eyes went wide. The number was more than she made in 3 months. Maybe 4. "Dennis, this can't be right." "It's right. It's one of those events where they pay well because they expect perfection. Black tie service. Luxury hotel. Very wealthy guests." He studied her face. "I told them you'd be perfect. But Nina, it's your choice. I know that world can be intimidating." Intimidating. That was a gentle word for it. Nina had served wealthy people before at catering gigs. She'd seen how they looked through her like she was furniture. How they snapped their fingers instead of saying, "Excuse me." How they complained about food that cost more than Nina's weekly grocery budget. But this money could pay for Aunt Marie's medication for months. It could catch up the electric bill, the water bill, even put a little away for emergencies. "What's the event?" she asked quietly. "Birthday party for Veronica Hale." Even Nina knew that name. Veronica Hale was socialite royalty in San Francisco. Her face appeared in magazines, always at gallery openings, charity benefits, fashion shows. Old money mixed with new money. The kind of woman who wore gowns that cost more than Nina's annual rent. Nina's hands trembled slightly as she held the paper. "I'll do it," she whispered. Dennis smiled with relief.
Good.
They'll send you details. You'll do great, Nina. Just remember, you're just as good as anyone in that room. But as Nina walked home that evening, climbing those 4 flights of stairs with the paper folded in her pocket, she didn't feel just as good as anyone. She felt like she was about to walk into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. Still, she would do it. For Aunt Marie. For the chance to breathe, just for a moment, without the weight of worry crushing her chest. She would serve their drinks, stay invisible, and leave with enough money to survive another season. It seemed simple enough. Saturday arrived too quickly. Nina stood outside the Grandview Hotel, staring up at its gleaming glass facade. Luxury cars pulled up to the entrance, one after another, releasing women in glittering gowns and men in perfect tuxedos. Doormen in white gloves opened doors. Valets ran back and forth. Nina wore her simple black pants, white button-up shirt, and the black vest the catering company had provided. Her shoes were the nicest she owned, bought secondhand, polished until they almost looked new. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. No jewelry except the small silver cross Aunt Marie had given her years ago. She looked like what she was, the help. You coming in or are you going to stand there all night? Nina turned. Another server, a young guy maybe her age with kind eyes, grinned at her. First time at one of these? He asked. That obvious? You've got that deer-in-headlights look. I'm Marcus. He gestured toward the service entrance. Come on. We go in the back. Never the front. Front's for people who belong here. They entered through a service corridor. All concrete and fluorescent lights, a completely different world from the marble and crystal that lay beyond. The catering manager gave them their assignments. Nina would be serving drinks and appetizers in the main ballroom. Smile, but not too much, the manager instructed. Make eye contact, but don't stare. Move through the crowd smoothly. If someone's rude, you smile anyway. If someone makes a pass at you, you politely extract yourself. You're invisible unless you're needed. Understood. 20 servers nodded. Good. This client pays extremely well, but she's also extremely particular. Perfect service tonight, people. When Nina finally entered the ballroom, she forgot to breathe. It was like stepping into a fairy tale, the kind where you're not the princess, you're the servant who scrubs the floors. The ceiling soared overhead, covered in what looked like 1,000 tiny lights mimicking stars. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung suspended in perfect symmetry. The floor was white marble veined with gold. Silk drapes in deep burgundy framed floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And the people. The women wore gowns that shimmered and flowed like liquid. Diamonds caught the light from every neck, every wrist, every ear. The men's tuxedos probably cost more than Nina's car, if she had a car. Everyone looked polished, perfect, like they'd been photoshopped into reality. Nina picked up her tray of champagne glasses, balanced it carefully, and stepped into the crowd. She moved like a ghost, just as she'd planned, offering drinks with a quiet champagne, moving smoothly between conversations she didn't listen to, keeping her eyes down, her presence minimal. It was working. She was invisible. Until she wasn't. Nina was navigating through a particularly dense cluster of guests, her tray perfectly balanced, when someone stepped backward without looking. She pivoted quickly to avoid them, but her shoulder bumped into someone else, someone solid. The tray wobbled. Her heart lurched. She steadied it just in time, not spilling a single drop. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, looking up. "I didn't." The words died in her throat. The man she'd bumped into was young, maybe 30, tall, with dark hair and eyes that were startlingly blue even in the soft lighting. He wore his tuxedo like it was a second skin, comfortable and natural. But what struck Nina wasn't his obvious wealth or his classical good looks. It was the way he looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. "Are you all right?" he asked, and his voice was genuinely concerned. Yes. I'm fine. I'm so sorry, sir. I should have been more careful." "You were plenty careful." That guy backed into your path. He glanced at her tray, then back at her face. "Impressive save, by the way. You didn't spill anything." Nina didn't know what to say. In her experience, wealthy people didn't apologize to servers. They didn't notice when someone else was at fault. They certainly didn't compliment her tray balancing skills. "Thank you," she managed. For a moment, just a brief, strange moment, they stood there in the middle of the crowd, looking at each other. Nina felt seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not judged. Not dismissed. Just seen. Then someone called out, "Ethan, there you are." The spell broke. The man, Ethan, gave Nina a small smile, almost apologetic, then turned away as someone pulled him into conversation. Nina slipped back into the crowd, her heart beating strangely fast. She didn't know who Ethan was. She didn't need to know. She was here to work, not to have moments with handsome strangers who probably wouldn't remember her face in an hour. But she couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on her, the kindness in them. She pushed it away. Focus. Work. Invisible. Across the ballroom, standing near the orchestra, a woman watched. Veronica Hale was stunning in the way that only money and maintenance can create. Her gown was emerald silk that hugged every curve before cascading to the floor. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves. Around her neck hung a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Nina would make in her entire lifetime, each stone catching the light like captured stars. She was beautiful. She was also furious. She'd seen the collision. Seen that little moment between Ethan and the waitress. Seen the way Ethan smiled at her. Ethan was Veronica's fiancé. Her prize. Her future. And some nobody in a cheap vest had just touched him. Veronica's perfectly manicured nails dug into her champagne glass. She smiled at the guests around her, laughed at their jokes, played the gracious birthday girl. But inside, something cold and cruel was calculating. The party continued. Music played. People danced. Nina served drinks and appetizers, falling back into her rhythm of invisibility. Everything seemed fine. And then, just after midnight, everything shattered. Veronica's scream cut through the music like a knife. "My necklace. Oh my God, my necklace is gone." The orchestra stumbled to a stop. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone turned toward Veronica, who stood with her hand at her bare throat, her face a perfect picture of shock and horror. "Someone stole my necklace." Her voice rose, trembling. "It was just here. It was my grandmother's. It's priceless." Security guards appeared from the edges of the room. The event coordinator rushed over. Guests murmured in shock and concern. Nina stood frozen near the wall, her empty tray hanging from her hand. And then Veronica turned. Her tear-filled eyes scanned the room, searching, and landed directly on Nina. "It was her," Veronica said, her voice breaking with emotion. "The waitress. She was near me earlier. She bumped into my fiancé, probably as a distraction. She must have taken it." Every single person in that ballroom turned to look at Nina. The security guards started moving toward her. Nina couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. Couldn't move. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. The marble floor beneath her feet suddenly felt like quicksand, and she was sinking, with 100 pairs of eyes watching her drown. Have you ever had a moment where your entire life changes in a single second? Not gradually. Not with warning. Just snap, and everything you thought was solid ground turns to air beneath your feet. That's what happened to Nina. One moment, she was invisible. The next, she was the only person anyone could see. The security guards moved toward her like walls closing in. Nina's tray slipped from her hands and clattered to the marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. "I didn't," she started, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I didn't take anything." "Check her pockets," someone in the crowd said. "Search all the staff," another voice added. Veronica stood in the center of the room, one hand still at her bare throat, tears streaming down her perfect face. She looked devastated, vulnerable, like a victim. "I'm not accusing anyone without proof," Veronica said, her voice trembling with what sounded like reluctant certainty. "But she was the only server who came close to me. And right after she bumped into Ethan, my fiancé, I noticed she kept looking at my necklace. I thought it was just admiration, but now. Nina felt sick. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. A security guard reached her, a large man with cold eyes. Ma'am, I need you to empty your pockets. I don't have it, Nina said, and now her voice was shaking. I swear I didn't take anything. I would never. Then you won't mind proving it. With trembling hands, Nina pulled out her pockets, empty except for a folded tissue and a mint. The guard wasn't satisfied. He gestured to a female security officer who stepped forward. I need to check your person, the woman said quietly, almost apologetically. Nina's eyes burned with unshed tears. Around her, wealthy guests whispered to each other. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked suspicious. A few looked almost excited. This was drama entertainment, something to talk about at brunch next week. The female guard patted her down professionally, but thoroughly. Nina stood there, arms slightly raised, feeling more exposed than if she'd been naked. Every shred of dignity she'd been clinging to was being stripped away in front of these people. Nothing, the guard finally announced. Check her bag, Veronica suggested, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Perhaps she hid it there, planning to retrieve it later? Nina's small purse was brought from the staff holding area. It contained exactly her phone, her wallet with $23 inside, Aunt Marie's medications that Nina had picked up on the way to work, a hair tie, and her keys. No necklace. It's not here, the guard said. For one brief second, Nina thought maybe this nightmare would end. Maybe they'd believe her now. Then Veronica spoke again, and her voice was sharp. Then she must have passed it to someone. Or hidden it somewhere in the hotel. She had access to the entire venue. Ma'am, the head of security said carefully, without actual evidence. My necklace is missing. Veronica's voice rose. It was worth over $2 million. And she was the only one near me. What more evidence do you need? $2 million. The number hit Nina like a physical blow. Even if she worked every day for the rest of her life, she could never pay that back. If they pressed charges, if they sued her, her aunt, what would happen to Aunt Marie? Please, Nina whispered, and she hated how broken she sounded. Please, I didn't do this. I swear on everything I love, I didn't take it. But who is going to believe a poor waitress over Veronica Hale? The head of security pulled out his phone, probably to call the police. Nina's legs felt weak. This was it. Her life was over. She'd be arrested, charged with theft. Even if they couldn't prove it, her name would be ruined. No one would ever hire her again. Aunt Marie would die because Nina couldn't afford her medication. All because she'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She couldn't have taken it. The voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a bell. Everyone turned. Ethan stepped forward, moving through the guests with quiet authority. He walked until he stood between Nina and the security guards, his presence somehow creating a shield. Ethan, Veronica said, her voice honeyed with concern. Sweetheart, I know you want to think the best of people, but… Nina was with me when your necklace disappeared, Ethan said calmly. The room went dead silent. Nina stared at him, her heart pounding. What was he doing? What? Veronica's mask slipped for just a second, showing something cold and sharp underneath. Ethan kept his voice steady, reasonable. After she bumped into me earlier, I asked her to step out onto the balcony. I wanted to apologize for the other guest backing into her path. We talked for several minutes. He looked at Nina, and something in his eyes told her to stay quiet. She was with me during the time you say the necklace went missing. So she couldn't have taken it. That's not possible, Veronica said, but her voice had an edge now. I would have seen. You were surrounded by guests all evening. The ballroom was crowded. Ethan turned to the security head. I'm telling you, as a witness, that this woman couldn't have taken the necklace. She wasn't even in the ballroom at the time. The head of security looked between Ethan and Veronica, clearly uncomfortable. This was no longer a simple theft accusation. This was now something between the engaged couple. Mr. Hale, he said carefully, are you certain about this timeline? Completely certain. Nina couldn't breathe. Ethan was lying. They hadn't gone to any balcony. They'd barely spoken for 30 seconds. But he was lying to protect her, and she had no idea why. Veronica's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "Ethan, why didn't you mention this before?" "Because it's private," he said simply. "And because I didn't realize I needed to provide an alibi for someone who clearly didn't commit a crime." The crowd buzzed with new whispers. This was getting messy. The birthday girl's fiancé defending the accused waitress? Admitting to a private conversation with her? This was scandal. Veronica recovered quickly, forcing her face back into a mask of confused sadness. I don't understand. If she didn't take it, then where is my necklace?" "Perhaps it fell off," Ethan suggested. "The clasp could have broken. Or perhaps it was never stolen at all, just misplaced." "I don't misplace $2 million necklaces, Ethan." "Then I suggest we review the security footage," he said calmly. "That should clear everything up." Veronica's eyes flashed. Just for a second. But Nina saw it. And suddenly Nina understood. Veronica knew exactly where that necklace was. The head of security nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. We'll review all footage from this evening. In the meantime," he looked at Nina. "You're free to go, ma'am. But please leave your contact information." Nina nodded numbly. Her hands shook as she wrote down her phone number and address. The other servers were being dismissed as well. The party was clearly over. As the guests began to filter out, still whispering and glancing at Nina, Ethan caught her eye one more time. "You're okay," he mouthed silently. But Nina wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. She grabbed her things and fled through the service entrance, down the concrete corridors, out into the cool San Francisco night. She walked 3 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a building, and finally let herself cry. Why had Ethan lied for her? What would happen when they reviewed the footage and saw they'd never gone to any balcony? And why did she have the terrible feeling that this nightmare was just beginning? Nina made it home sometime after 2 in the morning. She climbed those 4 flights of stairs like each step weighed 1,000 pounds. Aunt Marie was asleep, her breathing raspy but steady. Nina stood in the doorway watching her, tears sliding down her face. She'd done this for her aunt, taken this job for the money to keep her alive. And now everything was falling apart anyway. Nina didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten, playing the evening over and over in her mind. The accusation, the searches, the humiliation, Ethan's unexpected lie. Her phone buzzed just after 7 in the morning. Unknown number. Her heart lurched as she answered. "Hello." Nina Brooks. A woman's voice, professional and cold. "Yes, this is Laura Chen, Ms. Veronica Hale's personal assistant. Ms. Hale would like to speak with you. In person. Today." Nina's stomach dropped. "About what?" "Ms. Hale will explain when you arrive. The Grandview Hotel, penthouse suite, 10 o'clock. Don't be late." The line went dead. Nina stared at her phone. Every instinct screamed at her not to go. But what choice did she have? If she refused, Veronica could press charges, could destroy her completely. At 9:30, Nina kissed her still sleeping aunt on the forehead and left. The hotel looked different in daylight, less magical, more coldly expensive. Nina took the elevator to the penthouse floor, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a young woman who looked exhausted and terrified. Because she was. The penthouse door was opened by the same assistant who'd called. "Ms. Hale is waiting in the sitting room," she said, gesturing Nina inside. The suite was bigger than Nina's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay. Everything was white and gold and perfect. And sitting on a cream-colored sofa, looking fresh and beautiful despite last night's drama, was Veronica Hale. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't playing victim. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing Nina had ever seen. "Sit down, Nina," Veronica said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We need to talk." Nina sat, her hands clenched in her lap. Veronica studied her for a long moment, like someone examining an insect. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here. You accused me of theft," Nina said quietly. "I didn't do it." Oh, I know you didn't do it. Veronica's smile widened. Because I did. The words hung in the air between them. What? Nina whispered. I hid my own necklace, Veronica said casually, as if discussing the weather. It's currently in my safe, perfectly secure. The theft was simply a bit of theater. Nina couldn't breathe. Why? Because I saw the way Ethan looked at you. Veronica's voice turned sharp. That little moment you had. The way he smiled at you. Like you were a person. Like you mattered. It was nothing, Nina said desperately. We barely spoke. I'm no one.
Exactly.
You're no one. Veronica leaned forward. And yet, my fiancé lied for you.
Publicly.
In front of everyone. Do you understand what that means? Nina's heart was racing. He was just being kind. Ethan Hale doesn't lie. He's annoyingly honest, actually. It's one of his few flaws. Veronica's eyes glittered. But for you, he lied. Which means you're a problem. I'm not. So here's what's going to happen. Veronica's voice went cold and businesslike. You're going to confess to the theft. Nina jerked back. What? No.
Yes.
You're going to admit you took it. You'll say you panicked and hid it somewhere in the hotel. You'll return it. I'll arrange that part. You'll apologize publicly. And then you'll disappear from San Francisco forever. I can't do that, Nina whispered. I'll be arrested. I'll have a criminal record. I'll never work again. I'll make sure the charges are dropped after you confess and return it. You'll pay a fine, do some community service. It'll be over quickly. But my aunt. Your aunt. Veronica pulled out her phone, scrolled through it, then held it up. Nina's blood went cold. On the screen was information about Aunt Marie. Medical records. Her address. Everything. If you don't confess, Veronica said softly, I will destroy Ethan. Not just the engagement, I'll destroy the Hale family business. My father's firm has been looking for a reason to acquire Hale Industries for years. I have access to information that could tank their stock overnight. Ethan's mother built that company from nothing. It's her legacy. I will burn it to the ground. Tears streamed down Nina's face. Please. And then, Veronica continued, I'll make sure your aunt loses her medical coverage. I have friends on the board of her insurance company. It would be remarkably easy. Nina felt like she was drowning. So you see, Veronica said, standing up smoothly, you don't actually have a choice. Confess to the theft, or watch everyone you care about suffer. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. I'll be holding a press conference to address last night's incident. I expect you'll be there, ready to tell the truth. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. You were right about one thing, she said. You are no one. And no one doesn't get to have moments with people like Ethan Hale. Know your place. The assistant escorted Nina out. Nina made it to the street before she had to sit down on a bench, shaking so hard she thought she might break apart. Ethan had saved her last night. And now, to save him, to save his family, his mother's life work, she had to destroy herself. Nina pulled out her phone with trembling hands, opened her notes app, started typing a confession. I, Nina Brooks, admit that I stole. The words blurred through her tears. She was going to lose everything. Her reputation, her future, any chance of taking care of Aunt Marie. But at least Ethan would be safe. His family would be safe. At least she could do that much. Nina nodded numbly. Her hands shook as she wrote down her phone number and address. The other servers were being dismissed as well. The party was clearly over. As the guests began to filter out, still whispering and glancing at Nina, Ethan caught her eye one more time. You're okay, he mouthed silently. But Nina wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. She grabbed her things and fled through the service entrance, down the concrete corridors, out into the cool San Francisco night. She walked 3 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a building, and finally let herself cry. Why had Ethan lied for her? What would happen when they reviewed the footage and saw they'd never gone to any balcony? And why did she have the terrible feeling that this nightmare was just beginning? Nina made it home sometime after 2 in the morning. She climbed those 4 flights of stairs like each step weighed 1,000 pounds. Aunt Marie was asleep, her breathing raspy but steady. Nina stood in the doorway watching her, tears sliding down her face. She'd done this for her aunt, taken this job for the money to keep her alive. And now everything was falling apart anyway. Nina didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten, playing the evening over and over in her mind. The accusation, the searches, the humiliation, Ethan's unexpected lie. Her phone buzzed just after 7 in the morning. Unknown number. Her heart lurched as she answered. Hello. Nina Brooks. A woman's voice, professional and cold. Yes, this is Laura Chen, Ms. Veronica Hale's personal assistant. Ms. Hale would like to speak with you. In person. Today. Nina's stomach dropped. About what? Ms. Hale will explain when you arrive. The Grandview Hotel, penthouse suite, 10 o'clock. Don't be late. The line went dead. Nina stared at her phone. Every instinct screamed at her not to go. But what choice did she have? If she refused, Veronica could press charges, could destroy her completely. At 9:30, Nina kissed her still-sleeping aunt on the forehead and left. The hotel looked different in daylight, less magical, more coldly expensive. Nina took the elevator to the penthouse floor, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a young woman who looked exhausted and terrified. Because she was. The penthouse door was opened by the same assistant who'd called. Ms. Hale is waiting in the sitting room, she said, gesturing Nina inside. The suite was bigger than Nina's entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay. Everything was white and gold and perfect. And sitting on a cream-colored sofa, looking fresh and beautiful despite last night's drama, was Veronica Hale. She wasn't crying now. She wasn't playing victim. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing Nina had ever seen. Sit down, Nina, Veronica said, gesturing to the chair across from her. We need to talk. Nina sat, her hands clenched in her lap. Veronica studied her for a long moment, like someone examining an insect. You're probably wondering why I asked you here. You accused me of theft, Nina said quietly. I didn't do it. Oh, I know you didn't do it. Veronica's smile widened. Because I did. The words hung in the air between them. What? Nina whispered. I hid my own necklace, Veronica said casually, as if discussing the weather. It's currently in my safe, perfectly secure. The theft was simply a bit of theater. Nina couldn't breathe. Why? Because I saw the way Ethan looked at you. Veronica's voice turned sharp. That little moment you had. The way he smiled at you. Like you were a person. Like you mattered. It was nothing, Nina said desperately. We barely spoke. I'm no one.
Exactly.
You're no one. Veronica leaned forward. And yet, my fiancé lied for you.
Publicly.
In front of everyone. Do you understand what that means? Nina's heart was racing. He was just being kind. Ethan Hale doesn't lie. He's annoyingly honest, actually. It's one of his few flaws. Veronica's eyes glittered. But for you, he lied. Which means you're a problem. I'm not. So here's what's going to happen. Veronica's voice went cold and businesslike. You're going to confess to the theft. Nina jerked back. What? No.
Yes.
You're going to admit you took it. You'll say you panicked and hid it somewhere in the hotel. You'll return it. I'll arrange that part. You'll apologize publicly. And then you'll disappear from San Francisco forever. I can't do that, Nina whispered. I'll be arrested. I'll have a criminal record. I'll never work again. I'll make sure the charges are dropped after you confess and return it. You'll pay a fine, do some community service. It'll be over quickly. But my aunt. Your aunt. Veronica pulled out her phone, scrolled through it, then held it up. Nina's blood went cold. On the screen was information about Aunt Marie. Medical records. Her address. Everything. If you don't confess, Veronica said softly, I will destroy Ethan. Not just the engagement, I'll destroy the Hale family business. My father's firm has been looking for a reason to acquire Hale Industries for years. I have access to information that could tank their stock overnight. Ethan's mother built that company from nothing. It's her legacy. I will burn it to the ground. Tears streamed down Nina's face. Please. And then, Veronica continued, I'll make sure your aunt loses her medical coverage. I have friends on the board of her insurance company. It would be remarkably easy. Nina felt like she was drowning. So you see, Veronica said, standing up smoothly, you don't actually have a choice. Confess to the theft, or watch everyone you care about suffer. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. I'll be holding a press conference to address last night's incident. I expect you'll be there, ready to tell the truth. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. You are right about one thing, she said. You are no one. And no one doesn't get to have moments with people like Ethan Hale. Know your place. The assistant escorted Nina out. Nina made it to the street before she had to sit down on a bench, shaking so hard she thought she might break apart. Ethan had saved her last night. And now, to save him, to save his family, his mother's life work, she had to destroy herself. Nina pulled out her phone with trembling hands, opened her notes app, started typing a confession. I, Nina Brooks, admit that I stole. The words blurred through her tears. She was going to lose everything. Her reputation, her future, any chance of taking care of Aunt Marie. But at least Ethan would be safe. His family would be safe. At least she could do that much. She typed until the sun climbed higher in the sky. Typed until she had a full confession that sounded believable. Typed until she'd signed her life away. Then she sat on that bench and waited for tomorrow morning, when she would stand in front of cameras and destroy the only thing she had left. Her truth. What Nina didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that across the city, in a different office with a different view, another conversation was happening. Ethan Hale sat across from his mother, Catherine Hale, in her office at Hale Industries. Catherine was 63 years old, elegant and sharp as a blade. She'd built this company with her late husband, and after his death, she'd kept it thriving. She was brilliant, ruthless in business, and fiercely protective of her son. She was also nobody's fool. You lied, she said simply. Ethan didn't insult her intelligence by denying it. Yes. For a waitress you'd barely met. Yes. Why? Ethan stared out the window at the city. Because Veronica was lying. I could see it. And that girl, Nina, was terrified. She didn't take the necklace, Mom. I know she didn't. How do you know? The same way you taught me to read people in business. Her fear was real. Her confusion was real. Veronica's performance was. He shook his head. False. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been investigating Veronica. Ethan turned to look at his mother. You think I would let you marry someone without doing thorough research? Catherine's smile was thin. I've been having her followed for 3 months. Mom. She's having an affair, Ethan. With Marcus Devereaux, the hedge fund manager. They've been seeing each other for over a year. Catherine pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. I have photos. Hotel records. Everything. Ethan felt like he'd been punched. Why didn't you tell me? I was going to. I was waiting for the right moment. But after last night. Catherine's eyes were hard. After last night, I realized Veronica isn't just unfaithful. She's dangerous. She opened the folder and spread photographs across her desk. Veronica and Marcus Devereaux entering hotels. Kissing in his car. Meeting with lawyers. These are from meetings with Devereaux's legal team, Catherine said, pointing to specific photos. I had someone get access to their documentation. Veronica was planning to marry you, wait exactly 2 years, enough to avoid the prenup's infidelity clause, then divorce you, and take half of your assets. She and Devereaux were going to use that money to fund a hostile takeover of our company. Ethan sank into a chair, stunned. Last night's little drama? Catherine continued. That was her striking early. You embarrassed her by defending that girl. So she's moving up her timeline. She's going to use this scandal to pressure you, manipulate you, force your hand somehow. The waitress. Ethan said suddenly. Nina. Veronica's going to go after her. Probably. Ethan stood up. We need to stop this.
Now.
Today. Catherine smiled, a real smile, proud. I taught you well.
Yes.
Today. She picked up her phone and made a call. Richard? Catherine Hale. I need you to arrange something. A meeting. Veronica Hale, my son, myself, and one Nina Brooks. Yes, today. No, not optional. Tell Veronica, if she doesn't attend, the photographs go public.
She paused. Good.
4 o'clock. My office. She hung up and looked at Ethan. Now, she said, let's save your waitress and destroy your fiancé. Not necessarily in that order. At 3:45, Nina received a text from an unknown number. Catherine Hale's office. Hale Industries, 30th floor. 4 p.m. Come immediately. You are not in trouble.
CH.
Nina stared at the message. Catherine Hale. Ethan's mother. She should have been terrified. But somehow, something in that message felt different. You are not in trouble. Nina grabbed her jacket and ran. She arrived at Hale Industries at 3:58, breathless from running and taking 3 different buses. The building was glass and steel and intimidation. Security almost didn't let her up until someone called down and confirmed her name. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt like ascending into the sky. When the doors opened, a professional-looking woman greeted her. Ms. Brooks? This way, please. She was led down a hallway lined with art that probably cost more than Nina's life, into a conference room with a view that took her breath away. And there, already seated, was Veronica Hale. Veronica's face when she saw Nina was priceless. Shock, then fury, then a forced mask of calm. What is she doing here? Veronica demanded. She's here because I invited her, said a woman's voice. Catherine Hale entered the room, followed by Ethan. Ethan's eyes found Nina's immediately. She saw concern there. And something else. Determination. Everyone sit, Catherine said. It wasn't a suggestion. They sat. Catherine remained standing, like a general surveying her troops. Let me begin by saying this meeting is being recorded. Everything said here will be documented. I want that understood. Veronica's lawyer face snapped into place. Catherine, I don't know what you think. I think you staged a theft to manipulate my son. Catherine's voice was ice. I think you threatened an innocent woman. And I think you've been planning to destroy my family for over a year. She opened a folder. Photographs spilled across the table. Veronica's face drained of color. These are you and Marcus Devereaux, Catherine said calmly. Hotel rooms. Restaurants. His apartment. Shall I continue? I have several more folders. Those are. Veronica was stammering now, her composure cracking. Your affair partner? Catherine finished. Yes. I also have documentation of your meetings with his legal team. The plans for the hostile takeover. The timeline for divorcing my son. Would you like me to share those as well? Veronica looked at Ethan, her eyes filling with calculated tears. Ethan, sweetheart, I can explain. Don't. Ethan's voice was flat. Just don't. Catherine turned to Nina, and her expression softened slightly. Ms. Brooks, would you please tell us what happened this morning? Nina's voice shook, but she told them everything. The phone call, the meeting, Veronica's confession to staging the theft, the threats against Ethan, against Hale Industries, against Aunt Marie. By the time she finished, Veronica had gone dead silent. So, Catherine said, turning back to Veronica. Here's what's going to happen. The engagement is over, effective immediately. You will make a public statement that the necklace was found. It had simply fallen behind furniture at the hotel. You will clear Ms. Brooks's name completely. You will leave San Francisco and never contact my family again. And if I refuse? Veronica's voice was desperate now. Then I release everything. The affair. The conspiracy. Your father's firm will drop you to save face. I've already confirmed that with him, by the way. Your social standing will be obliterated. You'll be toxic to everyone you know. Catherine smiled coldly. I built an empire from nothing, Veronica. Do you really think I can't destroy someone who tried to take it from me? The fight went out of Veronica's eyes. She'd lost, and she knew it. Fine, she whispered. Excellent. My lawyers will have papers for you to sign within the hour. You have 24 hours to vacate any properties connected to my family. Catherine turned to Nina. Ms. Brooks, I apologize for what you've endured. My office will provide you with compensation for your trouble, and I'll personally ensure your aunt receives the medical care she needs. Nina's eyes filled with tears, but this time, from relief so overwhelming she could barely breathe. Thank you, she whispered. Catherine nodded. Then she looked at her son. Ethan, walk Ms. Brooks out. I'll finish here. As Nina stood on shaking legs, Veronica's voice cut across the room one last time, bitter and broken. You're making a mistake, Ethan. She's nobody. Ethan paused at the door. He looked back at Veronica, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but certain.
No, he said.
She's somebody who tells the truth. That makes her worth more than you ever were. Then he held the door open for Nina, and they walked out together. They didn't speak in the elevator. Didn't speak crossing the lobby. It wasn't until they were outside, standing in the fading afternoon light, that Ethan finally turned to Nina. Are you okay? He asked. Nina laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I don't know. Am I awake? Is this real? It's real. He smiled slightly. You're safe now. She can't touch you. Why did you do it? Nina asked suddenly. Last night, when you lied for me. You barely knew me. Why would you risk everything? Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city traffic. Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everyone wants something from you? Where every word, every gesture, is calculated? Where nothing is real? Nina thought about counting coins, about choosing between medicine and food, about being invisible. Different worlds, she said softly. Same kind of lonely. Yes, Ethan said.
Exactly that.
He looked at her. When I looked at you last night, when we bumped into each other, I saw someone real. Someone who wasn't performing. And when Veronica accused you, I saw real fear. Not the fake kind people perform for sympathy. Real terror.
He paused.
I couldn't let that happen to you. Not when I knew she was lying. You didn't know for sure. I knew enough. He smiled. My mother taught me to trust my instincts about people. Mine said you were honest. I was right. They stood there as the city moved around them. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by a moment of crisis and an act of courage. What happens now? Nina asked. For me? I figure out who I am without Veronica. Without the life I thought I was supposed to live. Ethan looked thoughtful. What about you? Nina thought about Aunt Marie, about medical bills, about the impossible weight that had been crushing her for so long. I take care of my aunt, she said. I keep working. I keep counting. I keep trying to survive. She smiled slightly. Same as always. That doesn't seem fair. Life isn't fair, Nina said simply. But some days you get lucky. Some days, someone lies for you when they don't have to. That's enough. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. This is my personal number, he said, handing it to her. Not for anything weird, he added quickly. Just if you ever need anything. Or if you want to get coffee sometime with someone who understands what it's like to be lonely in a crowded room. Nina took the card, her fingers brushing his. I'd like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ethan's smile was genuine. Maybe the first real smile Nina had seen from him.
Good.
I'll call you. You actually will? Or you're just being polite? I actually will. He started backing away toward where his car was waiting. I'm a terrible liar, remember? Except for when I'm lying to save someone from a false accusation. Nina laughed. Good to know. She watched him drive away, then looked down at the card in her hand. She'd come to that party expecting nothing but a paycheck and invisibility. She was leaving with justice, safety, and the phone number of someone who'd seen her when no one else had. Nina tucked the card carefully into her pocket and headed toward the bus stop. Tomorrow, she'd wake up in the same small apartment. She'd still be poor, still struggling, still counting, but something had shifted. For the first time in a very long time, Nina Brooks felt like she existed. Like she mattered. Like she was somebody. And that was worth more than all of Veronica Hale's diamonds combined. 3 years later, the community center on Mission Street wasn't fancy. The paint was fresh but simple. The floors were clean linoleum, not marble. The furniture was sturdy and functional, not designer.
But it was full of life.
In one room, people practiced job interview skills. In another, someone taught basic financial literacy. Upstairs, there was a free medical clinic. In the basement, support groups met every evening. The sign above the door read, Second Chances Community Center. Nina stood outside that door, watching the sunset paint the San Francisco sky in shades of orange and gold. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was longer now, loose around her shoulders. She looked peaceful,
Happy.
lost in thought. She turned to see Ethan walking up the sidewalk, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was dressed casually, jeans, a button-down shirt rolled to his elbows. He looked different from the man in the tuxedo 3 years ago. Lighter somehow. Real. Just thinking about how far we've come, Nina said, accepting the coffee with a smile. We've come pretty far, Ethan agreed, looking up at the building. This is the 5th center now, right? 5th in San Francisco. 6th if you count the one in Oakland. Nina sipped her coffee. And we broke ground on 2 more next month. After everything with Veronica had settled, after the dust had cleared, Ethan had called Nina. Just to check in, he'd said. Just to see how she was doing. They'd gotten coffee. Then dinner. Then more coffee. They'd talked about loneliness and wealth and poverty and truth. They talked about what mattered and what didn't. And slowly, carefully, they'd built something neither of them had expected. Ethan had stepped away from Hale Industries to figure out what he actually wanted to do with his life. Nina had kept working at the cafe, but with Catherine Hale's help and her insistence on paying Nina generously for consulting, she'd been able to breathe for the first time in years. And then one evening, sitting in Nina's tiny apartment with Aunt Marie sleeping peacefully in the corner, Nina had said, "What if we helped people like me? People who are working themselves to death and still can't get ahead." Ethan had looked at her with those blue eyes that saw everything and said, "Let's do it." Second Chances started as a small storefront. Job training, resume help, financial counseling. Then they added the medical clinic when Nina realized how many people were choosing between medicine and food, just like she had. Ethan had money and connections. Nina had experience and understanding. Together, they'd built something that mattered. Aunt Marie's inside, Nina said now. She's teaching the cooking class today. Ethan grinned. How many people? 23 signed up. She's in heaven. Aunt Marie had recovered beautifully with proper medical care. At 74 now, she was healthier than she'd been in years. And she'd found new purpose teaching people how to make nutritious meals on a tight budget, something she'd perfected over decades of raising Nina. My mom's coming by later, Ethan said. She wants to discuss the expansion budget. Catherine Hale had become one of Second Chance's biggest supporters and fiercest advocates. She sat on the board, brought in major donors, and occasionally terrified city officials into giving them permits faster. She also adored Nina, which Ethan found endlessly amusing. Your mom is scary, Nina said. Your mom loves you more than me, Ethan countered. That's because I'm more lovable. Can't argue with that. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching people come and go from the center. A young mother with 2 kids. An older man who'd recently lost his job. A teenager who needed help with college applications. People who were struggling. People who needed a second chance. Do you ever think about that night? Nina asked quietly. The party? Sometimes, Ethan admitted. I think about how Veronica tried to destroy you to protect her own lies. How close we came to never knowing each other. I think about your mother's face when she laid out all those photographs, Nina said, smiling slightly. Veronica didn't stand a chance. Nobody stands a chance against Catherine Hale when she's protecting her family. Am I family now? Nina asked, though she was grinning. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Nina's heart stopped. I was going to wait, Ethan said, until dinner tonight. I had this whole plan. But standing here, right now, in front of this building we made together. He opened the box. The ring inside wasn't a massive diamond. It was simple, elegant, a small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. Beautiful but not ostentatious.
Perfect.
Nina Brooks, Ethan said softly, you taught me what it means to be real.
To be honest.
To build something that matters. You taught me that value isn't measured in money or status, but in how you treat people when no one's watching. I don't want to spend another day pretending to be someone I'm not. I want to spend every day being exactly who I am with you. Tears streamed down Nina's face. That's really unfair. I wasn't prepared for a proposal today. I'm not wearing anything nice. You look perfect. I'm crying in front of the community center. I can wait until you're done. Nina laughed through her tears. You're ridiculous. Is that a yes? Yes, you idiot. Obviously yes. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because of course he'd figured out her size somehow. And then he kissed her right there on Mission Street while the sun set behind them and people walked past smiling at the happy couple. When they finally broke apart, Nina looked at the ring on her hand, then at the building in front of her, then at the man she loved. We did okay, didn't we? She said softly. We did more than okay, Ethan said. We did something that matters. Inside the community center, Aunt Marie's cooking class erupted in laughter. Through the windows, Nina could see people learning, helping each other, finding hope. She remembered the girl she'd been 3 years ago. Terrified. Counting pennies. Invisible. She thought about the night someone accused her of theft. The night she almost lost everything. The night Ethan Hale looked at her and saw someone worth saving. I need to tell you something, Nina said suddenly. Anything. That night at the party, when we bumped into each other, I wasn't just serving drinks. I was watching everyone, thinking about how different your world was from mine. How I'd never belong there. She looked up at him. I was wrong. I don't need to belong to that world. Because we built our own. Ethan pulled her close. Damn right we did. Language, Mr. Hale. We're in front of a family center. Darn right we did. Nina laughed and leaned against him, watching their world, not perfect, but real and good, and theirs, move around them. She'd come so far from that scared waitress. She'd survived false accusations and threats. She'd stood up when it would have been easier to stay down. And she'd learned something Veronica Hale had never understood. Real diamonds might sparkle, but real courage shines brighter. Real love matters more than real estate. And a real life, built on truth and kindness and hard work, is worth more than any amount of money could ever buy. Nina Brooks had started as nobody, but she'd become somebody who made a difference. And that, she thought, was the best revenge of all. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can lose is the lie you've been living. And sometimes the most precious thing you can find is someone who sees you, really sees you, when the whole world is looking right through you. This is a story about a diamond that was never stolen and a life that was almost lost. About lies that destroy and truths that save. About a woman who had nothing and a man who had everything, and how they both found what actually mattered somewhere in between. Remember, you're never just a waitress, just an assistant, just anything. You're always somebody. And sometimes it just takes one person seeing you, really seeing you, to remind you of that truth. Be that person for someone else. And when someone extends their hand to pull you up, take it. That's how we all survive. That's how we all become more than we thought we could be.